Okay. Welcome to episode 145 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Now, I know what you're thinking. This does sound a little bit different than the usual introduction to a regular Leaning into Leadership episode, but we're doing a special Father's Day edition today for the show. So my name is Liz Peppard, and I'll be interviewing your usual host today, Dr. Darrin Peppard. Welcome to Leaning into Leadership, Dad.
Oh, well, thank you, Liz. Very nice job. Great introduction. And, it's exciting to be on this side of the microphone for the show. For the first 144 episodes, I've been on the other side of the microphone. And just kind of a fun idea for Father's Day for us to sit down, for you to put me on the other side of the microphone. I mean, I know now, obviously for you, and you'll probably talk a little bit about it, but you're an early career leader. And that's a big part of the focus of my show has been to help early career leaders. So I know you have some questions. Those are probably questions that other early career leaders might have. So I'm super excited about this episode. So I'll throw it back over to you.
Well, perfect. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too because we've always kind of had this, I guess, special father-daughter bond too. Because I mean, you were a leader when I was growing up in my schools, and now I'm not, unfortunately, an educator. I think like a lot of your audience are in the educator space, but not all of them.
Right.
I just am in a leadership position at this point in my life. I did take the college route, and now I'm in my 20s, and I ended up in a management role. So yeah, I definitely think there's some similarities though of I am leading people, but I guess there are days where I think I'm crushing it, and there are days where I know I am 100% not crushing it. So I guess how do you balance those days of, okay, I really could improve here, that self-reflection moment? Do you have any words there?
That is such a great question. And I'm really glad that that's where you're starting this, because no matter if you are early in your career as a leader or you're even quite a ways in, you're going to have days that you really do crush it, and you're going to have days that really just don't go very well. The biggest thing I think is to not allow yourself to keep score too much on the bad days. I mean, you said it really, really well. I like that you said that you are leading people. I know you've heard me say it before, but we're in the people business. When you're in a leadership role, your job is to lead people. It isn't just about the sales projections and outcomes and lead generation and that kind of stuff like in your business, or test scores or graduation rates or whatever in the education space. It's really about helping people to be the best that they can be in their particular role. And so, you're going to have days where it's really, really good. And you're going to have days where, man, it is just not very good at all. And the key there is to not allow yourself to get too high or too low, when you get home and you start to reflect a little bit on your day. Naturally, as human beings, we tend to focus on the couple of things that didn't go well. I think even in your day, you probably still make several hundred decisions a day, and probably 98% of them are really good decisions. It's the 2% that you're going to come home and kick yourself about, right? You just can't allow yourself to get too down. And I know that sounds like just, a simple thing, to say, but to be able to do it, I think it's really be intentional with reflection, whether that's, keeping a journal. I know, obviously knowing you very well, you're really good at self-reflection. You also, and this is a trait you got from me, you do beat yourself up a little too much sometimes over the things that don't go well. But, whether that's journaling or, keeping notes in, a notes app on your phone, or, just some type of self-reflection, so that you remind yourself of the positives that happened in your day, and don't get so hung up on the difficult things, because that's a part of leadership. You're going to have to make tough decisions. You're going to have tough situations that don't always go the right way. But I'm sure we'll talk eventually in our conversation about, those relationships and the people that are around you. But you can't beat yourself up too much over it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's times where I get a little heavy though on the self-reflection, right? I mean, I recently was training someone for the first time. I was actually in charge of them they need to know these certain
Right.
things, these points, and I had to be in charge of that. And I was taking all these notes and everything. And, I got really heavy into that. I think, okay, well, I could have done this better. I could have done X, Y, or Z here to improve that. So how do you, I guess, kind of be in the moment? Because I
Yeah.
would just fully get
Right.
stuck into that little
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, I think that's really tough. But I mean, one thing that you said there too, though, was it was the first time doing it. So certainly to take some good notes about that and think about, okay, I can get a little bit better here, get a little bit better here. That's true with anything that you do. I mean, you were a competitive dancer growing up, and the very first time that you were taught a new dance, you didn't nail it the first time, right? It took repetition after repetition after repetition until it became almost like an unconscious habit. The same thing is true with this type of thing. When you have trained somebody, when you're on like the 50th person, it's going to be like automated
Yeah.
in your head. It's not going to, you'll look back on the first one and say, oh man, whew, that was not very good. I had this conversation this week with somebody, in the business now that I'm in. I speak a lot, right? And somebody asked me after one of my presentations, they're like, you just, you're really good at that. How did you get good at it? And the answer is you practice, you keep doing it. The more repetitions you get, the better you'll get at it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going deep into that reflection early, because as long as you're pulling out the good things too, not just the things that
Yeah.
didn't go well. If you can reflect and say, boy, I did this really, really well, and I think I talked about this particular piece really, really well, then that's a positive. And also I would tell you too, now that you have trained this individual, watch how that individual takes on the things that you have trained them in, because that is a little bit of feedback on your training. It's also obviously
Definitely.
feedback on them and their ability and how quickly they learn and how well they take on initiative, but it's also a reflection of your training. And if there's something that they're really crushing, think back to, okay, how did we do that in the training? And obviously that seemed to have worked well. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good because there's definitely moments where I can tell maybe I didn't teach this in the best way because, I don't think it's anything on an individual if they don't pick up on it that first time. It's okay, how can I pivot my teaching
Yeah.
skills here and kind of adapt to them and show them everything?
Yeah.
Because everyone's a different type of learner too. That's something I'm still getting used to because I'm a visual learner and
Yeah.
I don't even know how to teach those other types of learners. How do you have research that you look into or anything like that?
That's really, really interesting. And I would tell you to think back to the teachers you had as a student. And yes, you are very much a visual learner. Some people are kinesthetic learners, so they gotta do it with their hands, or they're really good at they're auditory learners, or they're the ones who just they can read a manual and they can do it. I am not that. I am much more of a kinesthetic learner than I am auditory or a visual learner. So everybody's got their own way of doing things. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that. Even though you're not in an education setting, asking how they best learn is a good way for you to help set them up for success. But it's also an opportunity for you to think about other ways to go about doing the training that you're doing. And again, I touched on this and then I went away from it, so I want to come back. Think about the teachers that you had as you were growing up. The ones that you really connected with the best were probably ones who did a good job of hitting your visual learning, that really connected with you the best. What were some of the things that they did? And then maybe what were some of those educators who maybe you connected with well, but they weren't necessarily, hitting that visual learning. What did they do that still allowed you to learn without being right in your wheelhouse? I guess, if that makes some sense.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, really an interesting point, and something that probably a lot of people don't think about. As we are growing the people around us, if we don't think about what are the ways that they best learn, that might inadvertently set them up to not be successful because we're only focusing on our way of doing things.
Definitely. So when you talk about, I mean, we're growing people around us too. Obviously, you want to go into, and this is the big way of how you live your life, go into it with positivity. There are those moments of negativity. You have to deal with those. You have to address those. And I think one of the biggest things I've heard is, well, it's your job. And that's a part of it. You do have to deal with
Yeah.
those negative bits and pieces of it. Even if you try to procrastinate as much as you possibly can, you have to deal with some negative things, such as,
Right.
speaking to an individual about their behavior at work, or even if it's, just performance, or if it's not performance related. So how do you, I guess, talk to those people and not make it sound like a straight up insult to them?
Right. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, they're called hard conversations for a reason because they're hard,
Yeah.
right? I know you just had one recently, and we had some conversations about that. And I think first and foremost, when it comes to actually having that difficult conversation, it's really about sticking to the facts and not making it personal. When you're talking about performance, yes, for the other individual, it's going to be personal, but you don't need to make it personal. You speak specifically to the actual performance. I had the wonderful pleasure of listening to some really amazing individuals through the course of my career, and some of the advice that I got about having some of those conversations were really about separating the behavior from the individual. And the name is escaping me right now, but an individual who I heard talk about this specific to dealing with student behavior, and I think this is very accurate also for adult behavior, said that he would actually sit with students and have an empty chair next to the student, and in the empty chair was the student behavior, where the student is in the chair. And he would tell the student, we're going to talk about your behavior, that's over here, this isn't about you the person, this is about the decisions that you've made.
I like that.
So sticking to the facts, the behaviors, the lack of performance, the whatever they might do. I mean, I think you're probably discovering now that adult behaviors are the things that will potentially drive you the most crazy at work, because like kids, adults make poor behavior decisions sometimes, but you still have to address those things, right? So yeah, don't make it personal. I think you stick to the facts too. Don't get into a big, prolonged, drawn-out conversation of, well, this person said this and nope, here are the facts. This is what happened, and then go right to the here's what needs to be done, the corrective action or the outcome. If you're terminating someone, that conversation should be as brief as possible. There's no reason to prolong it. It's again, don't make it personal. Go right to the facts, get the conversation done. If it's more of a coaching conversation, though, and you want to still grow them, even though maybe there are some negative pieces there, address those things and then reinforce that you believe in them and that that they can continue to get better and that you're there to support them. Obviously, that's, again, separate from the termination conversation. Termination is done.
Yeah.
But in this, and I know in the case of the one that you had to have, this is still about, we want this person to grow and get better. So letting them know, hey, I'm here for you. I want to support you. We're not expecting you to do this on your own. And let them know, hey, I'm going to be rooting for you, because then you're building them back up. And you're trying to finish on some type of a positive note. It's not like that's a fun conversation for them, right? No. I mean, they're not, walking out of there going, yeah, that was awesome.
No, I don't think you can avoid that.
No,
Unfortunately not.
no, but at least putting them in a position where they feel like, okay, yeah, I do have to get better. And I know that at least Liz is willing to help me. Liz is there to try and support me to get there. And ultimately, it's still on me to get there. So I think those are probably the best things that I would say about that.
Good, yeah. Well, and I think it's good too because another one of my coworkers had mentioned too, I was talking about, okay, well, what are some bits and pieces that I can do to help them improve on this now? And I was like, well, here's, what I'm thinking. They said, well, is that the issue at hand? Like, are these things that you're presenting that you think will help them? Does that even go back to the issue at all?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's good to hear too of, okay, maybe let's just bring it back, stick to the facts, and make it a coaching conversation. If you can, if you're fortunate enough that you can make it a coaching situation. Okay, how can we address it? How can I help? Help me help you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That type of thing. So
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really big. And I like how you said that too, help me help you, so that you're inviting them in to, let's collectively work to solve this. Let's help you get better. But ultimately, it's on them to take ownership of that and to ultimately either embrace or push away from getting better.
So I've got one for you. So how do you go about, and this isn't necessarily something that, it's another thing I should say that's not fun to deal with in the workplace, whether you're an educator or you're not an educator, but dealing with someone who just won't stop talking over you, even if they're in a position that is above you. So of course you want to learn from them. And that's something, this is an individual that I really do think highly of, and I think there's a lot to learn from them. But I am not heard in conversations with them in the room. I mean, how do you even go about it? And I think there is something to be said too. I am young. I'm in my early 20s, I've recently been promoted into this position of, I guess not power, but just leadership, right? I'm in a management role and I just can't even get my voice heard. Do you think that's just a personality thing, or do you even have tips of just be heard? I don't know.
It actually, it makes me wonder, and well, not wonder, but it makes me reflect on a few different things. First and foremost, at a point in time, and this was when I was a superintendent, I had a principal who was on my leadership team who interrupted frequently. He didn't interrupt me per se, I think a little bit, but basically anyone else that as they were talking, it was as if he was listening for the thing he could jump in and either prove them wrong or, oh, this is going to set up my point perfectly, so I'll just jump in and take it, right?
Building on that, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so now I don't think this is a strategy that may work for you, but what I did with this particular individual was I began interrupting him on purpose and then apologizing for interrupting and saying, oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt. I know that's not something we do here. Please continue.
Yeah, use that keyword.
Exactly. So I tried to model it for him. And actually, I think at a point it started to happen.
Okay.
It really did. Now, I'm not saying,
Reassuring.
go to work and interrupt this person and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, But I think there certainly are subtle ways that you can go about making sure that you're heard. I think when you have, and I think you do, when you have allies on the team, you might at times even talk with them about, hey, when we're in this meeting today, can you at a point turn and say, Liz, can I get some input from you? I'd really love to know your thought. If you have somebody who has a strong voice at the table, maybe they're not the strongest voice, but at least there's somebody who can, let's get Liz's voice into this conversation. If you have somebody like that is willing to do that for you, I know you have a couple who are kind of serving as a mentor and probably would be happy to do that for you. It's an interesting position to be in where it's someone who ranks higher than you that does that. So you're not going to do the, hey, I'm going to interrupt you and then apologize strategy like I did. But sometimes the individual doesn't realize they do it. I know in the individual that I'm talking about in his situation, for me, man, my glass shattering moment, that's definitely a Himium reference right there.
Yeah.
Yes, a little How I Met Your Mother. But one of mine in my leadership career, I was a principal, and it was when we had our second superintendent. He said to me at a point, we'd been working together for a couple of months, and he said, Darrin, I notice you say I disagree a lot. And whew, glass shattering moment. I didn't realize I was saying that. And now when I rarely say it, because I do rarely say that, when I do, it's almost like it grates at me, like, So maybe your team can work to a place where they will discover on their own, they'll have their own glass shattering moment of, oh, I didn't realize I was interrupting.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just excited, right? Sometimes they're like, hey, let's capitalize on this momentum. You're right, let's go. They're like doing the yes and thing, or maybe that's not the case. I don't know. I'm not in your meeting room, but
Yeah, and I think it can change. I mean, every single meeting it can be different. There's those times where someone is just excited, and you can tell. And those moments I don't mind at all, right?
Yeah.
I think that's exciting there too. But I also think there's something to be said about the I disagree. If you say it a lot, it loses some power. But if you don't say that a lot, and then you do choose to speak up with those moments of I disagree, here's why, list your bullet points or whatever you've got in your back pocket. But I think there's some power to that. So I'm kind of glad you said that, because I did notice, I would say about a month ago, I was in a meeting and there's an individual who's once again higher than me. Everyone's above me right now. But there was an individual who was talking about, such and such, I want to do this thing and that thing and that thing, and just throwing everything at the wall, see what would stick. And then someone just took a beat and very calmly said, I disagree, but here's why, and just gave very analytical bullet points, which I admire so much, and I hope to at a point take away when I'm not so young and just eager to please, right? And hopefully I can be very analytical at a point.
Yeah. Well, you're more analytical than you give yourself credit for. But
internally, but externally, I think it can come out a little crazy.
Maybe like not in the moment in the meeting.
Yeah. Afterwards, I can be like, I had some great points,
right,
but they came out all chaotic.
There's a real, there's an art to that. And it comes with experience. When I was an AP working under Dr. Randy Wendling, man, Randy was so good at allowing every other voice in the room. And I remember asking him about it at a point in time, and he told me it was very intentional. There would be times where it was like there was awkward pause, just waiting for another voice. And he was super intentional about being the last voice in the room. So often leaders, especially young leaders or early career leaders rather, think they need to get their voice out there right away. And it's that more seasoned leader who will wait and wait and wait to make sure that all the different voices. So like you mentioned, the person who, heard somebody, throw all kinds of stuff and then, I disagree. Another leader in that room who perhaps wouldn't use that kind of a strategy may have jumped in before that ever even came up. And I think that was something Randy was really strong at, was really just allowing, and not always asking or inviting, but just allowing the space for other voices to come out in dialogue, whether we were making a decision or we were talking through something, whatever it was. He just did a really, really good job about that. And I think that's something over time, you'll build that skill. And it's not that you're not being analytical. It's I don't know if it's almost like the meeting game has to slow down enough for you to feel like, you know exactly where, and you can see ahead of where it currently is. Sometimes that just takes time, it takes practice, but it also, like in Randy's case, it really takes being intentional about Okay, here's how I want to get my voice into the room, as opposed to just well, I'll interrupt somebody else, or I'll jump in, or the person that you mentioned who kind of used the spaghetti strategy of let's just chuck it at the wall and see what happens, right? It's yeah. Again, I think that's kind of the art part in the leadership, where knowing when your voice will best fit in the room, and how, again, we lead people, how we can get all those other voices in.
Definitely. It's like chess. It's like a game of chess.
Yeah.
And I never learned chess, so that's unfortunate for me.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take that up.
Yeah.
That's the
we
Father's
could.
Day
Yeah.
gift, right?
Well, there you
Like,
go. Yeah, we'll play some
learn
chess.
some
Yeah.
chess.
Yeah. I think I know one opening move in chess, and if that doesn't work, then I'm
Is checkmate chess?
well, yes,
that
but that's at the end.
Checkers
Yeah.
or I don't even see. I don't even know that much. I know there's a queen, and
There you go.
that's all I've got going
Yeah.
there.
All right. Well, we'll have to dig into that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we end on a good note here, we do have to ask you the iconic question, how are you leaning into leadership right now, since this show is all about leaning into leadership?
Yeah, I love that question. That's why I ask it all the time, and I didn't know you were going to ask it of me, so I'm glad you did. I would tell you right now, I think the number one thing I'm doing, aside from working to grow other leaders, continuing to get into different spaces. I mean, as we're recording this, I just got home yesterday from Texas, from the secondary school principal conference there, getting to know a lot more people, that type of thing. The number one thing I would say, and this is kind of working toward a future project for me, is really starting to do a lot of reading, listening to audiobooks, and digging deep into leadership team dynamics. It's the individual leadership piece has been a big thing for me a long time. And honestly, I think in the 3 years since I stopped being a superintendent and have been doing this work, I've learned even more about leadership probably than I did in 15 years as a formal leader. But now it's that team dynamic that I think is just so critical, and I'm doing a lot of research on that. I don't think I am. I'm starting to do a little bit of writing in that space, and I can see that being my next solo book project, really focusing on why do teams succeed? Why do teams not succeed? What are the things that leaders can do so that the team can reach its maximum potential? And I think the more I dig into that, the more research that I do on that, the more teams that I continue to work with throughout the country. Actually, I guess internationally, we have a team we're working with in Canada now. So the more of that I do, the more I can continue to learn and can continue to then turn and share that with other leadership teams.
I think that's a great answer. Definitely just getting the word out there so that people can learn as much as they can. That's all we can do, right?
Yeah.
You know, until you learn.
Well, for sure. And I mean, it's not like anybody's leadership team doesn't want to be a successful team. But what happens it happens in athletics, it happens in the corporate world, it happens in the education world, where teams sometimes, whether they're super talented or not, they don't necessarily get real clear about what the team is about. Maybe the goal is, winning a Super Bowl, or not having any, turnover within our organization, or maybe the goal is, I don't know, achieving a certain, sales rating, or whatever. We focus on maybe those goals, but we don't turn and focus on what do we have to do to grow each other as a team so that we can ensure we get there. Every team in the NFL has the goal of winning a Super Bowl. Every team in Major League Baseball has a goal of, winning the World Series. But do they intentionally put the work into growing the team as much as just thinking about the outcome? And the more that we can focus on the development of the team and on the dynamic within the team, and what has to happen so that we genuinely put ourselves and our individual statistics, sales, performance, whatever, ahead of the overall outcome of the team. I think that's just really, really big. So, yeah, that's an area I'm really, really leaning into heavily right now. I've found a lot of interest in that area. And just the more I talk with individual teams or talk with folks who are a part of a team, the more, I guess, curious I get about it.
Yeah, and I definitely like that answer. I think that's absolutely wonderful. It's such an iconic question, so it was really exciting for me to be able to ask you that and to kind of take over. I hope your audience isn't too disappointed that they didn't get to hear your lovely voice in the beginning and it was just me. But another iconic thing that you always do at the end of the episode too is a pep talk. So we're going to go ahead and go right into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think anybody is going to be disappointed to hear your voice. I know I certainly am not. I can't wait to listen to this episode as it is all finished up. So yeah, so now it is time for a pep talk. And this week on the pep talk, what I'm thinking about goes back to the work that I just did in Texas at the Texas Secondary School Principals Conference. First off, a tremendously large group. Probably 2,500 to 3,000 principals and assistant principals at this conference. And watching this large group interact really just continued to hammer home to me the importance of connection. The more that you work to build those connections, to build relationships with others, the more that you find yourself surrounded by people who can help you to be successful. I spent quite a bit of time with my occasional co-host here on the show, Todd Bloomer. And, Todd is like the mayor. Everybody there knows him. Everybody, wanted to talk to him and say hello to him. And it just reinforced again that importance of connection and how when we have other people that we can lean into when it's a challenging situation or when we're having some success and they want to reach out to us, that's really an important piece. And I was really excited to have an opportunity to spend time with those folks and to watch them interact with each other. So, folks, that's an important piece right there. Don't lose sight of connection. Make sure that you're spending time leaning into those relationships that you have with others and letting people know that you're there for them, whether it's a time of success or a time of challenge. That's what we've got for you here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Liz, thank you so much for interviewing me on the show. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me. This is a fun little different thing to do. So
yeah,
happy Father's Day, Dad.
Well, thank you. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Happy Father's Day to my dad, to my father-in-law, Dean. I hope you guys have a wonderful Father's Day. Thank you so much for your example. And everybody get out there. Have a road to awesome week.